Morning, Year 10. And in the words of one of my favourite singers, Elvis Costello, welcome to the working week. So, just in terms of this week, what we've got is retrieval from the previous week. So, on your Microsoft Teams page, there will be a retrieval quiz on the goldfinch. That's just 5 questions. I've given you individual feedback on your paper 2 articles, and then I'd like you to do some dirt on that response from me. Then in terms of new work, we're moving on to some literature paperwork this week. We're going to be looking at the poetry anthology. This week we're going to be looking at the poem Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I'm going to talk you through how to parse the poem, how to sort of break it down into its syllable structure. I've got a PowerPoint presentation, which has been designed by an excellent teacher called Stuart Reich, and then some content and structure questions for you to go through and respond to. So just looking at what we've done first. Is where I've put feedback. So on the left hand side here you can see this is feedback that I've done for people on GCSE Pod. What I'd like you to do now is could you edit and copy and paste that these articles and the feedback, and then please put them into the Microsoft Teams pages. And where people have submitted the work on Microsoft Teams, I've been able to put comments, which I've done in green pen as per usual, on your work yourself for you to have a look at and consider. So there's 2 elements of this. There's the individual feedback I've given you and the whole class feedback that's coming now. So when we look at that, some real qualities and strengths from this work. I picked out 6 people whose work I thought was particularly good, and the reasons for that. So these are the 40-mark questions, 25% of the whole language GCSE. And it's marked across 2 things. You get 24 marks for the quality of the content and organisation, 16 marks for technical accuracy. So if we look at what some people did, Chloe, a fantastic range of sentence structures and organisation in her work. She really used short sentences incredibly well, sparingly as well, so it was used at the right terms. Kezia wrote with great controlled passion in her articles, so she presented very strong, forthright opinions, but did so in a very organised framework, which came across as professional and believable as articles. Aaliyah used some really nice techniques, and her writing was informal, which is often what an article should do, because it's trying to speak to a reader, it's trying to speak to their feelings and emotions about a situation as opposed to just inform them. But it was still disciplined enough to be a convincing and credible piece of article style writing. Isabel used some really beautiful cyclical structures. So her essay started off with a 3 one-word sentences and then finished with the same 3 one-word sentences, and that worked incredibly well as cyclical structures. Amelia would have got 16 out of 16 for the technical element. As well as her writing being very powerful, her attention to detail was superb. Even down to words like touristed, that when I looked at, I thought, well, is that actually a word? And I had to look it up to check that it wasn't. It's the past tense of the verb to tourist. So fantastic attention to detail there. And Sorrel's writing showed great optimism and enthusiasm in terms of what she's doing, and that's important in articles as well, because it's part of engaging the reader. Across the class, your writing on the NHS and the coronavirus questions was exceptional. Without exception, they were really, really terrific. They were interesting, passionate, well argued and thoughtful, and show that irrespective of the very difficult and challenging things happening in the world at the moment, you are coping brilliantly, and your work is demonstrating that. The exercise book work that people were photographing and sending to me, which is absolutely fine as a way of submission, was beautifully presented and highly organised. It was pleasing to see a high level of engagement with the GCSE pod work, so 22 out of 25 of you engaged with that, and that's now been marked on there. And again, it's good to see everyone getting increasingly used to using Microsoft Teams in an effective way, because it is the most helpful medium for submitting and sharing work. In terms of misconceptions, so think about your individual word choices with these pieces. Just a simple thing, for example, one student wrote about how in the current era politics is becoming more popular, and I think what they actually meant is political activism is becoming more popular. So it's a nuanced thing, isn't it? It's a small thing, but it's the difference between, say, an 8 and a 9 in terms of your grading, if your whole article is seeded with these kind of very specific, very precise individual language choices. With the paper 2 question 5 work, there's no need to try and balance the ideas and do a sort of on the one hand but on the other hand type essay, because it's not a discursive essay in that way, is it? It's an article, and when you read a newspaper article, it's setting out a particular opinion or insight. It's not setting two sides of the debate, and therefore this is important in ensuring that your argument doesn't deviate. So this is where you need to be a tough editor of the work, which is the dirt I want you to do today, because you can go off on tangents quite easily with work like this, and it may seem relevant, but actually, is it that relevant to your particular argument? So, for example, in the graffiti question that people worked on, several people mentioned Banksy, and that's fine, but remember the question was about, does graffiti enhance and improve a city? So if you are going to mention a particular artist, rather than giving a kind of potted biography of them, can you actually link to how their work improves or enhances the nature of a city? So it's that kind of thing to think about. So in terms of some logistical things, could you please copy and paste articles written in GCSE Pod along with my feedback into the English Language Paper 2 folders? Similarly, any photographs from exercise books that have yet to be added. I've done this for some people myself, so that should now sync with your folders. Upload the other work completed during the last few weeks into the appropriate folder, so you have a digital expert collating all your content. So similarly, the work we've done on Jekyll and Hyde, put that in the right areas. You can break this down into individual pages and be really organised with it. The dirt this week then is to be a strong editor of your own work. It should only be a few lines, so in terms of the quantity you're being asked to produce, it shouldn't take too long, but the specific here is looking at the work closely in terms of the timings and the organisation of things. So I want you to select a short section from both of the articles that you've written, only 2 or 3 lines, and then editing it in Teams, explain why those sections don't actually add to your argument. That's the point, isn't it? Can you identify the bits of your writing that don't inform, persuade or advise? That's the nature of these paper 2 question 5 work. So today we'll be looking at the poetry anthology, the poem Ozymandias. Just to read through it for you so we're clear on pronunciations. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So the first activity I want you to do in relation to this poem is what we call parsing, which is breaking down the poem into its syllable structure and its breakdown. So this poem is written in iambic pentameter, so each line is 10 syllables. A couple of them are 9 or 11, but the vast majority of them are 10 syllables. And remember, pentameter stands for 5, and the iamb is a unit, a foot is how it's described, of 2 syllables. So to give you an example here, if we look at how we break this down, the lone is 2 syllables, and lev 2 syllables, el sans 2 syllables, stretch far 2 syllables, away 2 syllables. So the lone is a foot, away is a foot. They're feet of 2 syllables. And they're called iambs, a short and long syllable, d, dum. So what I want you to do is write out the poem. You can use this as you can do it as a Word document, or you can just write it out in your exercise book. And I want you to go through the whole poem and parse it. So what this means is that you go through the poem, and each time you break the syllable structure down with these virgules, and backslashes if you prefer, and you break it down and you organize it into the 2 syllables. So you look for 1, 2 syllables, 1, 2 syllables. Sometimes it will break across words, as you can see here, and try and think about why the writer has done that. And then highlight important words that you think might be emphasized by the rhythm. So for example, here in this verse, lone, sands and far are all emphasized, aren't they? Which again just creates that greater sense of distance and desolation and the desert area in the reader's mind from the poet, just by their use of iambic pentameter, what we call the meter of the poem. Then what I've got for you is a presentation from a teacher called Stuart Pryke, who puts a lot of his materials up on Twitter, which is very useful. And all I want you to do with this is just go through and read over it, because I think it provides some useful information and some useful visual references and cue points. I don't want you to do any writing from this presentation. Just to think about the pictures, think about the images. Here is one of the statues of Saddam Hussein, who was the dictator of Iraq, being pulled down and toppled. So those of you who will take part in tutorials this week, we're going to work through these 5 questions, what we call oracy tasks. So these are the questions that you're going to be thinking about, and these are the questions that we're going to discuss in tutorials over the course of the week. So where do I need to complete this work and where? So just a reminder, so retrieval quiz on the goldfinch will be in Teams, and then your Dirt on Paper 2 articles needs to be done. And again, edit your articles in the class notebook folder, language paper 2. The new work will be parsing the poem and your content and structure answers. And again, I want you to upload your responses to the poetry anthology in the class notebook. And that should give you a clear idea of what you need to do. So the work is being set on Monday, the 4th of May, for completion date, Monday, the 11th of May. Good luck with your work this week. Please feel to communicate with me via our Microsoft Teams page, and hopefully see a few of you this week for some tutorials where we're going to go over those oracy questions. And good luck with the week. And most importantly, I hope you and your family and loved ones are all well at this continued extraordinary time. Take care, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.